Emily had always been good at hiding her feelings, but that day was different. She was in the middle of typing a report when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. The office was unusually quiet. Most of her coworkers had already gone for lunch. She didn't look up at first, but the moment she heard the soft click of the door closing, her heart skipped a beat. She turned and saw Daniel, her boss, standing near the door. He wasn't just any boss. He was the one who had always treated her with respect, who noticed the small details others ignored, who carried himself with a calm strength that made people trust him instantly. He looked at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. Emily's mind raced. Why had he closed the door? He never did that. He was known for keeping things professional and open. She quickly tried to recall if she had made a mistake in her work. Maybe an error in the presentation or a missed deadline. The thought made her palms sweat. Daniel walked slowly toward her desk, his eyes steady on her. He wasn't holding any files, no papers, nothing that suggested this was about work. He simply leaned against the edge of her desk, folding his arms across his chest. The air around them felt heavier, almost as if the small office had shrunk in size. "Emily," he began, his voice low and calm. "We need to talk." Her throat went dry. She forced herself to nod, even though she had no idea what was coming. For a moment, silence stretched between them. She could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the ticking of the wall clock, and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She gripped the edge of her chair, trying not to let her nerves show. "I wanted to wait for the right time," Daniel continued, his eyes searching hers. "But sometimes waiting too long makes things harder." Emily blinked, unsure what he meant. Her first thought was that he was about to criticize her work. But something in his tone, something softer than usual, made her doubt that. She didn't know what to say, so she simply whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, Emily, you've done everything right. More than right." Those words should have relaxed her, but instead they made her even more nervous. She had always wanted to impress him, to prove her worth. But the way he said it felt different, personal, almost vulnerable. Emily tried to steady her breathing. She glanced at the closed door and then back at him. Her mind replayed countless small moments, the way his eyes lingered on her during meetings, the way he asked if she was doing okay when no one else cared, the way his smile seemed a little warmer whenever it was directed at her. She had dismissed those moments as her imagination, but now, maybe they weren't. Daniel shifted slightly, as if choosing his words carefully. His presence so close, his calm but intense gaze, it was overwhelming. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something important. Something that could change everything. The silence stretched again, and Emily found herself blurting out, "Then, why did you close the door?" Her own question startled her, but she needed to know. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile, though his eyes remained serious. "Because what I'm about to say isn't about work. It's about something I can't ignore anymore." Emily froze. Her pulse raced faster. The thought that he might be about to confess something she had secretly longed to hear both thrilled and terrified her. She wanted to believe it, but she was afraid of what it might mean for her job, her reputation, her future. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to look into his eyes. "I don't understand," she whispered, though deep down she feared she already did. Daniel leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if the walls might hear. "You will." Those two words sent a shiver down her spine. She realized this was not going to be just another office conversation. It wasn't about reports or meetings. It was something deeper, something that had been building quietly between them for months, maybe longer. In that moment, Emily understood why her hands were trembling, why her chest felt so tight. She had always known that working so closely with him was dangerous, not because of his authority, but because of the way he made her feel. And now, with the door closed, his eyes locked on hers, and his words carrying weight she couldn't ignore. She realized her world was about to change, but whether it was for better or worse, she didn't yet know. Emily sat frozen in her chair, staring at Daniel. His words from the last moment kept ringing in her head. This isn't about work. She didn't know how to respond. Her fingers curled tightly into her lap, her chest rising and falling faster with every second. Daniel pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down. It wasn't the usual way he spoke to his employees. He didn't look like a boss giving feedback. He looked like a man wrestling with something he had carried for too long. His voice softened. "Emily, you've been doing an amazing job here. Everyone sees it. But that's not why I'm here right now." Her throat tightened. She wanted to interrupt to steer the conversation back to safe ground. But the seriousness in his eyes kept her quiet. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I've noticed something that goes beyond work. Something I've tried to hide because it's not professional." He paused, taking in a slow breath. "The truth is, I look at you differently. Not just as part of the team. You become someone I think about when the office is quiet. Someone who makes this place feel less lonely." Emily's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her chest. She had dreamed of words like these, but hearing them out loud left her shaken. She lowered her gaze quickly, afraid he might see the storm of emotions on her face. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice almost breaking, "you can't say things like that. You're my boss. People wouldn't understand." "I know," he replied quickly, his tone calm but firm. "I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head. I know what it looks like. I know the risks. But I also know that pretending I don't feel this way is even harder." Emily sat in silence, heart pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. She wanted to run from the room, yet at the same time, she didn't want him to stop talking. He leaned back, looking at her with eyes that carried more honesty than she had ever seen. "Do you think I don't notice the way you avoid looking at me sometimes? Or the way your smile changes when it's me you're talking to? I know you feel it too, even if you don't want to admit it." Her face flushed. Every hidden glance, every quiet moment when their hands brushed while passing papers. Every time her chest tightened when he walked into the room, it all came back to her. She had spent months convincing herself it was just her imagination. Now, hearing him put it into words, she could no longer deny it. Emily stood abruptly, needing space, her chair sliding back with a soft scrape. She walked to the window, staring out at the city skyline. Her reflection in the glass showed her flushed cheeks and wide eyes. "Daniel, this isn't fair," she said quietly. "You're putting me in an impossible position." He didn't rise to follow her. He stayed seated, his voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "You're right. It isn't fair. But life doesn't always give us easy choices. I don't want to pressure you. I just need to be honest. Because if I keep pretending, I'll regret it forever." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. She hated how much his words touched her. She hated how her heart leaped, even as her mind screamed about consequences. She turned, finally facing him again. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I couldn't keep watching you from a distance," he admitted. "Every day it grew harder to stay silent. And today I realized I'd rather risk being honest than live with the weight of silence." Emily felt her knees weaken. She leaned against the windowsill for support. She wanted to deny him, to protect herself from the storm that was surely coming. But her own heart betrayed her. She whispered almost too softly for him to hear, "You don't know what you're asking of me?" Daniel's expression softened, his eyes full of something that looked like hope and fear all at once. "I'm not asking you for an answer today. I'm not asking you to make promises. All I want is for you to know how I feel." The room grew painfully quiet again. Emily's thoughts spun faster than she could control. She thought of her career, her coworkers, the endless whispers that would follow if anyone ever found out. But she also thought of the long nights she had spent replaying his smiles, the way her chest warmed whenever he spoke her name, the comfort of his presence even when they weren't speaking. She pressed her hand against her forehead, closing her eyes. She wished she could stop time, give herself space to breathe. But she couldn't. When she opened her eyes again, Daniel was still watching her, patient, steady, but clearly carrying the same turmoil. "Emily," he said softly, If you tell me you feel nothing, I'll walk out that door right now and never bring this up again. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then maybe we owe it to ourselves to see where this could go." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She had no idea what to say. All she knew was that the walls she had carefully built inside herself were beginning to crack. The weight of his confession filled the air between them. Every second felt stretched, every heartbeat louder than the last. Emily's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, and in that moment she realized something terrifying. She did feel it. She had always felt it, but saying it out loud would change everything. The clock on the wall ticked softly, the only sound in the room as the truth hung heavily between them. Emily looked at him, her eyes full of conflict, her heart torn between fear and longing. And though she didn't yet speak the words, she knew the silence was already giving him the answer he had been waiting for. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled like threads she couldn't separate. Daniel's words repeated in her mind again and again. "If you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then maybe we owe it to ourselves to see where this could go." She rolled over, hugging her pillow tightly. Part of her wanted to ignore everything, to walk into the office the next morning and pretend none of it had happened. That would be easier, safer, but her heart refused to let go of the way his eyes had softened when he spoke, the way his voice had trembled with honesty. The next day, she walked into work with her chest tight and her steps uncertain. The office buzzed with the usual noise phones ringing, keyboards clattering, coworkers chatting near the coffee machine, but all of it felt distant. Her eyes went straight to Daniel's office door. It was open, as it usually was, but he wasn't inside. Emily tried to focus on her tasks. She typed, answered emails, joined a meeting, but every sound, every moment felt heavy with unspoken tension. By the time the afternoon arrived, she was exhausted from trying to hide the storm inside her. When she finally looked up, Daniel was standing near her desk. His expression was calm, but his eyes held the same quiet question as before. "Emily," he said softly, "do you have a minute?" Her coworkers were nearby, so she nodded quickly, trying to keep her face neutral. She followed him into his office. This time, he didn't close the door. He simply sat at his desk and gestured for her to sit across from him. "I don't want to make this harder for you," he began, "but I promised myself I'd give you space. Still, I need to know where you stand. Not for me, for both of us." Emily's hands trembled in her lap. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "Daniel, I don't know what to say then, just be honest," he said gently. "No pressure, no expectations, just honesty." Her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of every possible outcome pressing on her shoulders. If she admitted the truth, everything in her life could change: her job, her reputation, the way people saw her. But if she denied it, if she buried her feelings, she knew she would regret it for the rest of her life. Taking a shaky breath, she whispered, "I've tried so hard to ignore it. I told myself it was just admiration, that it was nothing. But it's not nothing. It hasn't been nothing for a long time." Her words hung in the air like fragile glass, delicate and impossible to take back. Daniel's face softened, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in him. His shoulders relaxed and a quiet smile touched his lips. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice carrying relief. Emily felt her cheeks burn. She had never felt so exposed, yet so free. It was as if she had been holding her breath for months and had finally exhaled. But the fear returned just as quickly. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "We can't just pretend this is simple." Daniel leaned forward, his tone serious again. "You're right. It isn't simple. I can't promise it will be easy. People might judge. We might face setbacks. But what I can promise is that I'll never take your heart for granted. I won't let this be something careless or hidden in the shadows. If we choose this, we choose it together." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew he meant it. She could see it in the way he looked at her, not like a boss, not even like a man chasing a fleeting attraction. But like someone who had finally found what he'd been searching for, Emily closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She remembered the long evenings when he stayed late, the times he carried more than his share without complaint, the way he always asked about her day even when his was far heavier. She thought of the kindness she had seen in him, the quiet strength, the patience. When she opened her eyes again, her voice shook, but her words were clear. "I don't know how we'll handle it, but I do know I feel the same. I felt it for so long I almost forgot what it was like not to." Daniel exhaled as if a weight had finally lifted. For a moment, he just sat there, looking at her as though the whole world had shifted in that instant. Still, uncertainty lingered between them. They both knew the choice they had just made carried risks. Their careers, their reputations, even their friendships at work, all of it could be shaken by what they were stepping into. But Emily also knew something else. The moment she spoke her truth, something inside her changed. She wasn't afraid of her feelings anymore. She wasn't hiding. And even though the road ahead looked uncertain, she couldn't deny the peace that came with honesty. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Whatever happens next, we'll take it one step at a time. No rushing. No pressure. Just us figuring it out together." Emily nodded slowly, her heart calmer than it had been in days. She still didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. As she stood to leave his office, she caught his eyes again. The look they shared was brief, but it carried more than words could. It carried the weight of a new beginning, and as she returned to her desk, she realized something important. The choice had already been made, and now there was no turning back. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate dance. Emily and Daniel moved through the office like nothing had changed, but deep inside, everything had. Every glance carried weight, every smile held a secret. They kept their conversations professional during the day, but when their eyes met, it was impossible to ignore the unspoken bond growing stronger between them. Emily tried her best to stay focused on work, but the smallest things reminded her of that night in his office. The way he had looked at her, the honesty in his voice, the relief in his smile, it all played in her mind when she least expected it. Even simple tasks, like handing him a folder or sitting across from him in a meeting, carried an invisible tension that neither of them could escape. Daniel, too, seemed changed. He was still the steady, thoughtful leader everyone respected, but when it came to Emily, his guard had dropped. She noticed it in the way his tone softened whenever he spoke her name, or how his eyes lingered on her just a little longer than they should, despite the warmth that grew between them. Fear was never far away. Emily often lay awake at night, worrying about what people would think if they found out. Would her coworkers whisper behind her back? Would her career be ruined? She couldn't deny her feelings, but she also couldn't silence the questions that came with them. One late evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Emily stayed behind to finish a project. The glow of her computer screen lit up the quiet room. She didn't hear Daniel approach until his voice broke the silence. "You're still here?" he asked gently. She turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Just wrapping this up. What about you?" He shrugged, stepping closer. "I could ask the same. Seems we both forget the concept of going home." For a moment they simply stood there, the office quiet around them. Daniel's eyes searched hers, and this time he didn't hide the emotion behind them. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't want to keep living in two worlds. I don't want this to be something we're always afraid of." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He took a breath, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I don't want us to be a secret. I don't want you to feel like this is something to be ashamed of. Whatever comes, we face it together. If people talk, they talk. If it's difficult, we handle it. But what I feel for you is real, and I won't let fear make it small." Emily's eyes stung with tears. For weeks she had carried the weight of doubt, the fear of being judged, the worry of losing everything she had worked for. But hearing him say those words, so sure and so honest, filled her with a sudden calm. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but clear. "I've been scared, Daniel. Scared of what people will think, scared of what we could lose. But more than anything, I've been scared of losing this before it even begins. His expression softened, and he reached out not to touch her, but to simply hold the space between them, as if giving her the choice to close the distance. Then let's not lose it, he said quietly. Let's give it a chance. Emily looked into his eyes and saw no hesitation, no second guessing. Just a man who was willing to risk his comfort, his reputation, even his carefully built walls, for something genuine. And in that moment, her fear began to fade. She realized that real love was never free of risks, but it was also never worth running from. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, together. A smile spread across Daniel's face, small but full of meaning. It wasn't the triumphant smile of someone who had won, it was the peaceful smile of someone who had finally found what he had been searching for. From that night on, things between them shifted. They still worked with the same professionalism during the day. But when the office doors closed and the world grew quiet, they allowed themselves to be honest. They shared conversations about dreams, fears, and the kind of future they might build. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't reckless, it was careful, patient, and filled with mutual respect. Emily found herself seeing sides of Daniel she had never noticed before. The man who once seemed untouchable now showed his vulnerability. He spoke about the weight of leadership, the loneliness that came with it, the way he had buried his feelings for too long. And in return, Emily shared her own fears, the constant pressure to prove herself, the worry of disappointing others, the longing she had hidden for so long. Together, they found comfort in each other's honesty. Of course, challenges came. They weren't naive. There were days when a careless glance from a coworker made Emily's stomach twist with anxiety, or when Daniel worried about how his choices might affect the team. But every time the fear arose, they faced it together, reminding each other of the decision they had made in that quiet office, not to hide, not to shrink, but to trust in what they had. One evening, months later, as they walked out of the building side by side, Emily thought back to the moment it had all begun, the sound of the door closing, the weight of his words, the fear and the hope that had collided inside her. At the time, she had seen it as the beginning of something risky, something uncertain. But now, she understood it for what it truly was. That closed door hadn't been a wall between them. It had been the opening of something far greater. And, though their story was still being written, Emily knew one thing with certainty. Love, even when complicated, was worth every step of the journey.